I had so much love and passion to give. And because it wasn't able to be received, I started to disconnect from myself, thinking that there's something inherently wrong with who I am at my core. Now, when that disconnect starts happening, we start building this false sense of self. And when we start building this false sense of self, what happens is we experience this deep form of loneliness. This is where loneliness comes from. Loneliness at its core is a disconnection from your soul. It's disconnection from self. The most lonely thing you can experience in this human experience is to be disconnected from oneself. And this is where you can be in a crowded room and still feel alone. This is where you can have the most loving, beautiful, caring relationship and still feel alone, or it's not enough. This is where you can be a high-performing, super successful business owner and it's still not enough. And there's this deep sense of loneliness. And then there's the distraction that comes with that. Then there's the filling of that void.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. Heal the boy so the man can appear. This message lies at the core of my next guest's work, Ryan Moresby-White. As a relationship coach and advocate for men's mental health, Ryan is devoted to helping men uncover and heal the root causes of their suffering, unresolved childhood trauma, internalized shame, and the emotional disconnection so many men carry in silence. His mission is clear: to guide men into a deeper relationship with themselves, to help them face the wounds of their past with compassion and courage, and to support them in reclaiming a more integrated, authentic expression of masculinity, one that holds both strength and softness, direction and depth. Born in South Africa and raised in Australia, Ryan appeared to be doing everything right on the surface nearly a decade ago, building a successful career in the construction industry and relentlessly following the path he believed he was meant to take. Yet internally, the weight of living a façade began to wear on him. Over time, it became clear that the high expectations placed on him growing up, emotional disconnection within his family, and a deep fear of abandonment had quietly shaped his sense of self, leaving him with the belief that he was unworthy and unlovable. It wasn't until he came face to face with his deep need for significance and the emotional pain he had been trying to mask that he began the journey of unraveling his past and rebuilding himself from within. It was during this pivotal time that it became clear to him: if we want lives of authenticity and freedom, we must address our early developmental stages and understand how they continue to influence us today. In our conversation, Ryan and I dive deep into how we're shaped from a young age as boys, the stories we inherit, and the internalized shame that festers as a result of emotional wounding. We discuss how to move through the shame and also explore how our relationships with our mothers and fathers shape us, unpacking the mother wound and examining how Ryan worked through his relationship with his father, ultimately finding acceptance for the high demands placed on him from a young age. We discuss the critical role that cultivating nourishment as a discipline, along with the importance of brotherhood and community, plays as essential pillars in fostering emotional resilience. As I see it, this episode is a powerful one for any man looking to gain deeper understanding of how our past shapes our present, impacting our relationships, professional lives, and connection to ourselves. It touches on essential pillars needed for a journey of restoration and healing, and offers a glimpse into what's possible when a man does this work. And now, let's dive into this powerful and heart-led conversation with Ryan Moresby-White and me. Ryan, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on Heart of Man today. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling open and just ready to drop in with you, bro, and share some deep truth.
I was very much looking forward to our conversation, and I feel very grateful for our brother, Lindsay Beister, who's also been on the podcast of Heart of Man, for connecting us. And yeah, just taking some time as well to explore and study your work. I've come to recognize as well that there's a lot of parallels between what we do. The place that I really want us to begin today is with numerous interviews that I've heard. One statement that would commonly come through which seems to be the core of your work today, is heal the boy so the man can appear. For any man who's now listening in, who's tuning into this conversation right now, what would you tell him around why this conversation is so important? And what would be helpful for our listeners to know about you and your own personal journey that made this work so instrumental for you?
Healing the boy and awakening the man is very dear to my heart because it's been my journey. It's been my journey from boy to man, and what that's looked like. And I really come back to a real pivotal moment for me, which was a period of time where I was in construction. I was 21 years old. I made $15,000 in 1 week as a 21-year-old. I was looking at taking on employees at a young age. I was working 7 days a week. I was destroyed. I was wrecked. I was lonely. I was depleted. I was depressed. I'd pushed all my friends away. But from the outside looking in, it looked like I was crushing it. It looked like I was doing well.
Right.
And it got to this point where not only that, but I was also pushing and striving to be a professional athlete in some sport. It was, first of all, it was rugby, then it was motocross. So not only all of that work, but also me striving and pushing myself and destroying myself in the gym every single day outside of the work as well, which led me down that road of almost taking my life at 21 years old, where there was a period of time of about 6 months where I really considered it to be a lot easier to leave this world than it would be to stay in it. That was really the catalyst that led me down the path to where I am today. Now, what led me to that point was the little boy within me who felt that he needed to be something other than himself in order to be loved, who strived for success, who wanted to be a professional athlete for the validation, to be seen, to be loved, to have people cheer for him. But beneath that was a little boy who was seeking that from mum and dad. Wasn't obviously the end of the journey, right? It's been a continuous unfolding of the boy, and it still will be. And we'll get into more of that as to how that is and why it really is a journey for men.
Yeah.
But that was one of the first big turning points for me, was hitting that rock bottom and making a decision where it was, I can either end this right now, or this could be the moment that changes everything. And for the first time, I actually listened to what my heart wanted. And that was, I want to help people. It was a decision. It was one decision. And I pushed my tools, my trailer in the shed. They still sit there today. And I closed up shop in my business and I started working at a bottle shop. I hated every minute of it. But that's the whole thing. It's like when your ladder's being up the wrong wall, you have to climb back down that ladder, right? While you're putting and rebuilding this ladder on the wall that you're supposed to be going up. Yeah, I listened to my heart and went after coaching. And not only that, it was a full-bodied decision to go within and really do the deep inner work on myself. And it's been a continuous journey since then. And that was almost a decade ago. And that's been my commitment and my embodiment, to continuously deepening into myself and healing the little boy as he shows up in different ways.
What a beautiful introduction. And I feel like there's so many threads that I want to pull from, but I'm noticing that there's a curiosity in me to hear a little bit more about that decision that you had made. And I ponder as well on the many men who might be listening, who might be in similar stages where they are at a particular point in their lives asking themselves the question, how the fuck did I get here? Like, what is it that has been driving me? This is not the life I chose. This is not the life that I wanted to really live, right? And it sounds to me that you clearly came to that point, and you even mentioned as well there was this moment where you even considered taking your own life. I wonder, was there a path between considering I want to take my life here to, no, I'm going to make a decision now to actually change this. I actually want to heal. I really want to work through this. And I as well want to help people.
Having a healthy masculine role model. So I had a lot of coaches growing up, and I had one specific coach that was my first experience of like, whoa, like that's what it feels like to be in the presence of a healthy man.
Yeah.
Not knowing what I was feeling, but what I was feeling was safety. And that safety actually led me down the path of him, referring things to me like Tony Robbins, reading certain books, Robin Sharma, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, like all of these things. He started subtly referring these things to me to listen to. And his energy, his presence, the safety that he actually created for me was really the guiding angel in a way that I needed to really go down my path. And
if I could just jump in here, how do you believe he was providing you that safety? What was he maybe knowingly or even unknowingly doing that was giving you that? Just for any man who might listen in and be like, okay, I'm interested to actually receive some support, maybe even guidance from someone. So what could they maybe look out for?
I could feel his heart. Yeah. I could feel that he genuinely cared.
Yeah.
And I could feel that he was, for the most part, living on purpose. Not that he was extremely financially successful, but he was doing what he loved every single day. And I was rocking up to the gym, right? Because he was my coach. I was rocking up to the gym after a long day at work, on the tools, grinding. I was 21 years old, wrecked, destroyed. I was probably making more money than him, right? But he was more happy. He was more fulfilled.
Right.
The smile on his face, the energy that he had doing what he loved doing, that's what really got me thinking differently and created that that respect to, you know what, I'm going to listen to what this guy's got to say.
Yeah. What was the very thing that you were chasing in that moment, more consciously versus unconsciously? Was it success? Was it a sense of financial freedom, status? What was it for you?
Freedom.
Okay.
Freedom in doing something that I'm genuinely passionate about. And here's the thing, that comes back to one of my core wounds. As a boy, I was so passionate about everything I did.
Yep.
I would put so much heart into it. And as a little boy, I would give my heart. I'd wear my heart on my sleeve, and I gave so much. It was too much for some people who didn't know what to do with that love. And because it was too much for them, they didn't know what to do with it. They couldn't receive it. I stopped giving it. I closed myself. I put myself in a cage, in a box, and I minimized that passion and that expression and excitement for the things that I truly love. And I went after the things that I thought I had to go after from a state of survival, because it's more important for us to be loved, liked, accepted, especially by our caregivers and the people that we love more than anything. Mum and dad are like our God growing up. They're like our representation and experience of God. And, we will do and be and become anything that we need to become in order to get their love and approval in any way. So it was me wanting to come back to that full expression of my true nature, my soul, which was that deep, passionate love that of helping and serving and doing something that truly lights me up and excites me.
And I can really relate to this, especially this element of, being incredibly curious, being a bundle of, I'm going to say, full of liveness and just love and just having so much to give, but then almost feeling like the things that I wanted to give to others, they were not being received in the way that I wanted. Maybe add a few experiences of ridicule, judgment, humiliation, being chastised as well. And the more I would just contract, I would become more closed off. And then eventually I would really feel like I was this autonomous being. I was completely alone. And I want to expand a little bit on this conversation around healing the boy and allowing the man to appear. And for any man now who's listening in who might actually not even understand how his past, and you've already been touching on it, I just want to make that clear, but how his past might be influencing, shaping, or even dictating the way he's actually showing up in the present moment, specifically in romantic relationships, as in this podcast, we focus a lot around that.
So bringing it back to that little boy who gave his heart and it wasn't received because his caregivers didn't know how to receive it or what to do with it, right? It was too much for them. There's core emotional needs that we need to have met in childhood to feel safe enough for me to give that love, to be that full expressed little boy. And when I didn't have the safety to, or when we don't have the safety to continue being that fully expressed self, like I said, survival's more important. And in that was this form of emotional abandonment, of my love's not being received. And then there's some core beliefs that are made based on that as well. But for the most part, when this love isn't being received, this boy then feels this sense of shame and rejection that there's something inherently wrong with me. What I experienced as well was this form of, and what a lot of men experience is, let's say, a father who's extremely busy, who's got a lot going on. When we experience a form of emotional disconnection in our caregivers, because as children, we're basically communicating with their nervous system. That's how we develop a sense of self, is we need that safety from their nervous system to reflect back to our nervous system. All of us is loved and welcomed. And when they're not connected to their nervous system, it's like we have an empty mirror and we're staring into nothing. And we've got nothing reflecting back to us that we're enough and that we're worthy and we're good enough. So when we don't have that, we create and we experience this deep level of shame. Then it becomes toxic over time as we start to internalize this shame that there's something inherently wrong or broken within me.
What does that process look like, if I can just interject, to internalize that experience of shame? Because there's different forms of shame from my understanding of what you're saying, right?
The process of internalizing that shame is consistently not having that mirror to reflect back that to you as a little boy, that all of you is loved and welcome and enough. That perpetuated over a long enough period of time starts to become a feeling of, I haven't made a mistake, or I haven't made a problem. I am the mistake. I am the problem. Or it's because my parents aren't okay emotionally, it's either my fault, which is the shame of that. There's something inherently wrong with me. The fact that they're emotionally not okay, it must be my fault because the world revolves around us. It's either my fault or my problem. And when we take that on over a long enough period of time, that shame becomes internalized and we start building and shaping this identity that's based upon the foundation of shame, that who I am inherently is broken. There's something wrong with me at a core level. So I must become whoever I need to be in order to get love. And this is where the nice guy comes from. This is where a man disconnects from himself. So this is what I speak, and I'll come back to your original question of how the boy really comes out. But this is really what the deep work that men go through in this journey is really uncovering the original pain of the wounded inner boy who felt that there was something inherently wrong or broken within him. Now, this is where a boy starts disconnecting from himself. I shared that journey around, I had so much love and passion to give, and because it wasn't able to be received, I started to disconnect from myself, thinking that there's something inherently wrong with who I am at my core. Now, when that disconnect starts happening, we start building this false sense of self. And when we start building this false sense of self, what happens is we experience this deep form of loneliness. This is where loneliness comes from. Loneliness at its core is a disconnection from your soul. It's disconnection from self. The most lonely thing you can experience in this human experience is to be disconnected from oneself, your soul. And this is where you can be in a crowded room and still feel alone. This is where you can have the most loving, beautiful, caring relationship and still feel alone, or like it's not enough. This is where you can be a high-performing, super successful business owner and it's still not enough, and there's this deep sense of loneliness. And then there's the distraction that comes with that. Then there's the filling of that void. So for a visual for those who are watching the video, right? That disconnect where we start veering further away from our true self, we start becoming more disconnected and we start creating more dissonance between our true self, our soul. Now, there's this big gap. That's a whole lot of empty space. That's a whole lot of emptiness. And what men try and fill that emptiness with is distraction, is women, is porn, is drugs, is partying, alcohol, it's working, it's making money, it's all of it. I work with men who've exited their company for $500 million and they've lost themselves because they no longer have this thing reflecting back to them that they're enough. And typically, the breaking point for the false self to crumble that's been created, the breaking point is when they no longer have that thing reflecting back to them their self-worth, which is typically relationship breakdowns, or lacking purpose in their mission when their business isn't going the way it's supposed to go. And what it comes back down to is the original pain of the wounded inner boy. The core of it. The boy who feels toxically shamed, that there's something inherently wrong with him, where in relationship, he no longer sees problems in a relationship as a problem. He sees it as a reflection that he's the problem, or he is a problem, or there's something wrong with him. That's why when his partner, when she brings awareness to him, how he could show up better in the relationship, he becomes defensive or reactive.
Yeah.
Because what she's bringing to him is reflecting the toxic shame of the boy who feels that he's broken. And he'll do everything in his power to avoid that, so he defends. This is where we start picking up the different masks. The people pleaser, the hero, the savior, the victim, all of it. All comes back down to this original pain.
Yep. Beautifully put. There's so much in what you said. I want to reflect a few things back that kind of stood out for me, and then as well some pieces that I'm personally as well seeing in my own work. And there's definitely a lot of agreement based on everything that you've spoken of. But what I'm hearing is in many ways there is a certain interpretation that's made of certain experiences that we have very young. And as a result, an identity is created. And the more we're not met in the ways where we're required to be met, the more that identity strengthens, such as I'm bad, I'm faulty, I'm wrong, I'm not enough as I am, I'm not love. Those are the identities that we form that develop, that cultivate a sense of internalized sense of shame within ourselves. And the insidious thing around that is as soon as we develop those, it's almost that we need to be in accordance to those beliefs, those identities with our behavior, with the way we're feeling, with the way we're thinking, because at the core of it, we want to be in accordance with the way we view ourselves, with the way we see ourselves. And so this is how that wound in so many ways gets perpetuated, that when we show up in a past version that way, we might perpetuate that same perspective 20, 30, 40 years down the line. So that was something that really stuck out for me.
Yeah.
I really like as well what you said around, I'm going to call it the rupture of self. And one of the things as well that stands out for me, particularly as well in the work that I do, which is more in the realms of embodiment, really supporting men to come back into contact with their felt sense experience. Because I would argue the more you can come into contact with your felt sense experience, the more that connection to soul that you're referring to as well can come back. And I definitely can very much connect to that, this sense of loneliness that came actually as a result of not being present with the aspects of myself that were underneath that, which would be the fear, which would be the shame, which would be the sadness, the grief, the anger, the guilt, all these things, because I didn't have the tool set. I didn't have the resources to actually handle all those aspects. And so the only way for me to move forward was to disconnect from those. And it's almost, this is where the hungry ghost phenomenon is created, where it's like we have this void that we're now seeking to really fill and fill and fill.
Two things that really come up in that, which really brings it back to your first original question, how the past may affect the present moment. Now, there's two things, and it really reflects based on what you shared there, is we have the conceptual self, which is the self-image and the idea that we have of ourself, which is our identity. Now, as humans, it's more important for us to stay in alignment with what we believe to be true about ourselves.
Yep.
An Olympic athlete who believes they're a gold medalist, who has the identity of a gold medalist, will take the actions unconsciously in order to actually achieve that, because that's the identity that they hold. When our self-image matches the identity of the man that we wish to be, that's when we become in alignment with that man, because we unconsciously take actions towards that. But unfortunately, most men are still looking through the perception, through the eyes, through the lenses of the boy. Reason being is because of the second thing, which is the embodied self. So the conceptual self is the idea. And a great way to really get an idea of what the conceptual self is imagine a map of a city. So you go on Google Maps and you look at the map of the city. It's like, cool, I can see that's New York City. I have a conceptual idea of the city. I have an idea of what it looks like. The embodied self, so the next one, is the felt sense of what it would be like standing on the corner of a street in the city, feeling the wind, hearing the noise, feeling the people brushing up against you, like the actual embodied lived experience. Now, the embodied self, our body holds and stores emotion. And for the most part, this is what I'm speaking of when I'm speaking about the wounded inner boy. It's the trapped and stored emotion within our body of the frozen energy of the emotion that didn't have the safety to be felt in childhood. Now, with implicit memory, it's our body's emotional memory. Imagine, so your favorite song, right? Imagine you're at a concert with your friends and your favorite person is on stage performing. The sunset's going down. It's incredible. It's a vibe. You're having the best time in your life ever. Then 2 years later, you're driving down the road, maybe driving to work, and that same song comes on and you feel all of those same emotions. That event of the music coming through our five senses or coming through the senses of hearing it signals and triggers the same emotions, our embodied experience of what that song means to us, the anchored emotion to that song. Now, think of that in relationship. A little boy who's experienced this form of emotional abandonment or this sense of disconnect when it comes to connection in attachment in early stages of relating with his family, with his caregivers, then gets into a relationship as an adult. And how this played out for me, I had a dad who, so grateful for him, he worked a lot. And he wasn't very emotionally present with us, with the family. And because of that, as a little boy, I constantly felt like there was something that was out there that was more important than me. It was this form of emotional abandonment over time. I wanted his heart. I wanted his love. I wanted his connection. And how that then showed up, so that implicit, embodied, felt sense, that memory, how that then showed up in relationship was I'd be driving down the road, my partner would be on her phone. And the same kind of event where there's something that's more important than me triggered the same reaction of the little boy who felt emotionally abandoned. So that's why the reaction doesn't make sense, because in that moment, through implicit memory, our body's emotional memory of the lived experience shows up in the moment. Now, that's why, like what you shared, it's so important for men to have that embodied felt sense of what's happening in their body and being with the emotional experience. Because until we go back into that emotion and actually create the safety for that to be felt, or for a man to grieve the childhood that he didn't have, or for him to grieve the little boy who felt that there was something inherently wrong with him, it takes for a man to go back within himself, meet the depth of himself, reclaim his little boy, feel that, process that. And only once he does that, he'll have a deep awareness of how it shows up in the present moment. Yeah. And until he goes back, he might have an idea. And this was me, I used to be so aware of all of my wounds. Oh yeah, that's a core emotional wound of mine. And that's why I'm anxiously attached. That's not doing anything about it.
Yeah. You were intellectualizing about the
Yeah, it took for me to actually go into that emotion and create safety into it and learn what my nervous system needs in those moments of feeling abandoned emotionally, to then when it shows up in the moment, I know what I need to create safety in my own nervous system. I know what I need to feel safe in relationship. One big thing that men struggle with is one of the first things I help them create is them having an embodied experience of what safety actually feels like in their own body. Because you ask most men, what is safety to you? Or what does safety feel like in your body? Like, no idea.
It's like if someone, I'm not unsafe.
Yeah.
They don't even question that, I would say.
No one's running at me with a knife. I'm good.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's really creating that embodied experience. Because if you don't know what safety feels like in your own nervous system, you don't know what you need in relationship to feel safe, what a healthy relationship actually looks or feels like. It's so foreign to you because you don't know what safety actually is in your own body.
Hey, it's Alex here. Before we dive back into a conversation, I'd like to share something that's very close to my heart, which is my one-to-one coaching. I've had the great privilege of working with individuals from diverse backgrounds, all seeking to deepen their connection with themselves embody deeper confidence, thrive in their relationships. Through this work, I've had the great honor to support my clients through incredible transformations. Among other things, they gain deeper clarity, resilience, and strong connections, both personally and professionally. Here's what some of them had to say about our work.
I was able to fully reconnect with myself, which enabled me to fully reconnect with my partner. All of a sudden, I was having discussions that I had feared, that I had avoided for years. I started leaning into conflict. I felt more empowered.
And I was just blown away by how skilled he was as a guide, as a coach. He really met me where I was at.
Thank you, Alex, for this amazing time. You changed my life, and it's so crazy what's possible in such a short time.
Don't think twice. Sign up, take the leap to join him at any of his courses and programs. You will not be disappointed, and you will come out a new, incredible, like same, but evolved version of you, and it's going to be amazing.
I feel more confident, more grounded, and in control of my emotions.
If somebody is actually looking to think about or thinking about to join it, I would say it's a no-brainer.
It was just a beautiful and magical experience, and therefore I'm going to work with him in the future for sure. And when you seek change in your life, when you seek more happiness and freedom in your life, then you definitely should start with Alex.
As you can see, people from all corners of the world have experienced profound changes. And while I'm constantly evolving in my work, my one-to-one coaching remains my favorite offering. The intimacy, dedication, and transformation that's present within this container is undeniable. At the time of releasing this episode, I have just one slot available for my one-to-one coaching. If you feel called to take the next step, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find a link to my website, email me, or send me a DM on Instagram, and you'll find all details in the show notes below. As I've communicated in the past as a disclaimer, availability might have changed by the time you hear this. My encouragement is to not let it hold you back if you're feeling the call. Reach out, and I'd be glad to explore how I can support you on your journey. Now, let's get back to our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, safety in many ways is an embodied expression. It's an embodied understanding, right? And it's a different language in the realms of the nervous system versus an intellectual one. Intellectually, we might not even perceive that we feel unsafe, but the more sensitivity or the more connection we actually cultivate within our felt sense experience, there is definitely a clear understanding of, oh, this is actually making me feel contracted here, or this is actually giving me a sense of openness in this conversation. And a few things I might just want to add that I think could be useful as well for the listeners. You shared some examples of your own experience as well with your father. And I consider as well that, one definition I like of trauma is anything that's too much, too fast, too soon. And I just consider as well, it doesn't have to be anything that's over the top, dramatic, overwhelming. And of course, like such things happen to people, right? But I think any experience where we were not effectively held through it, where we were not able to be guided, we were not able to express our experience, where we are almost on our own in the experience, that itself can already create such an imprint that you'd as well spoken of. And just consider how many of these imprints can occur through a lifetime, through many decades. And those very experiences can then shape as well our relationships.
Yeah.
One of the things I would like to get into, so any man who's listening here right now and he's like, all right, I feel like I have an understanding that I might have some internalized shame. These are the ways that it's showing up for me. How does a man actually begin, and what is the process of moving through the internalized sense of shame and come into deeper felt sense connection with himself?
The most powerful and effective way for a man to heal shame is in brotherhood, is in community. One of the most successful programs in the entire world is Alcoholics Anonymous. At the core of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's the boy. It's the wounded inner boy who is seeking for something outside of him to soothe his nervous system and to feel some sort of connection. When a man drinks, he feels connected to himself, right? He feels free and expressive and whatnot, right? So at the core of it is the toxic shame of the wounded inner boy. That's why it's been the most successful program. Shame can't live where there's light. So in order to heal shame, it's to shine light on it so it no longer has power over you. Shame can only have power over you if it's in the darkness and it's not being seen. And the most powerful way is for a man to be seen in a safe, sacred brotherhood of embodied men who can hold him in that. And for him to be heard and seen and received and supported in him sharing the things that he's most deeply shameful for. That's how a man heals and moves through that. That's what I've experienced in the hundreds of men that I've worked with all over the world.
For any man who's listening in and says, Ryan, this sounds fucking terrifying. I've had experiences with other men where I got chastised, I got ridiculed, I got bullied. I don't fucking trust men. What would you say to that guy?
That was me. Yeah. Yeah, that was me. The brotherhood wound is a big thing for a lot of men. And it was for me. I couldn't trust men. That little boy who couldn't trust the consistency of the emotions of the masculine that he experienced growing up, then turned to being held by women. One of the worst, biggest mistakes that men can do is turn to women to support them emotionally. And that was one of my biggest mistakes, is not leaning into brotherhood, opening into brotherhood.
Why do you believe that is a mistake?
As men, we need our own pillar of emotional support. Now, when we don't have that, we lean on our woman for emotional support. Now, when we're leaning on her emotionally for support because we don't have brothers to support us, who's she supposed to lean on? Who's she supposed to consistently rely and depend on emotionally if she can feel that this man isn't solid in himself? I'm not saying close yourself off and don't be vulnerable with your partner. I'm not saying never be supported or want to be supported by her emotionally.
Yep.
It's the difference. It's leaning on her for emotional support. You can lean on your brothers. You can lean on men for support. It's a different kind of energy. And I neglected that for a long time. And it takes for like there to be that level of safety for a man to be invited into a safe space of other men. And I know that a lot of these men's workspaces can be too much or too intimidating for a lot of men. And I fully get that because that was me for a long time. And unfortunately, it took for me to lose a relationship because I didn't have that support and I was seeking for her for that emotional support. And I wasn't solid in myself as a man. And it got to the point where, and unfortunately, like most men I work with, it gets to the point where they're like, my partner's gone, everyone's gone, I'm alone, I'm on my own. I need something. I need brothers. I need support. And typically that's some of the biggest initiations for men into brotherhood is going through a breakup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agreed, man. And it's definitely been as well one of my pillars of how I got into men's work. And I think one of the unfortunate things as well is that we're so deeply socialized and conditioned towards completely disconnecting from our emotionality. And so as a result, we actually don't cultivate a level of competence with our emotionality. And then adding on to that as well, there's going to be a lot of ways that most men, or many men at least, will have been policed by other men around their emotionality. Don't be such a pussy. Don't be gay. They really inform us around how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to behave among other men. And so as a result, because we are emotional beings, we're sensitive beings, if we have no place to go with those emotions, we will eventually lean too much onto a partner because that's the only space that we perceive feeling a sense of safety. And it was definitely as well one of my own detriments where I was in a relationship where the things that were arising, because up until that point, I was really avoiding intimacy because intimacy was just simply not safe. And so opening my heart to this woman brought up all the stuff that was undealt with. And it was too big for that container to hold alone. It was definitely not something that she should have held on her own. And even though I was working with a coach at the time, it just wasn't enough. And I now recognize the difference it makes when we have strong men who support and as well praise these aspects of us. where we can lean on them, but then as well, we're challenged in healthy ways as well,
Yep.
and supported and strengthened. So I feel that is the balance that's really needed.
Yeah, challenge and support.
I feel like you were already touching to the relationship to the feminine, how a lot of men might be leaning onto their partners. And I feel like this points to one subject matter that you often address, which is a man's relationship to his mother. And often what's also communicated as the mother wound. And I actually wrote down one thing that you said in an interview that I'd just like to recite here because it was so poignant. When a man experiences the mother wound, he doesn't have the space to build an emotional support system around himself because his life is built around getting these met by others. That really stood out for me. And so for a man who's now, again, listening to this, and he's like not even aware around how his relationship to his mother might be influencing his romantic relationship, what would you tell him and how would you describe the mother wound?
The motherly energy is the energy of care, love, nurturing, safety, the feeling of being like truly held as you're welcomed into this world. Yeah. The motherly energy is also that safe nervous system that reflects back to you that all of you is loved and welcomed and okay. A safe nervous system who's regulated, connected to themselves, right, and is able to provide that safety for you to be connected to yourself, because independence in our first stage of development is infancy. In infancy stage, we are solely dependent on our caregivers to meet our needs. The strength that we actually develop, the ego strength that we develop in that stage is I am you. So we see the world not as we are, but we see the world as through the eyes of our caregivers. We are them, and we're experiencing the world through them. Now, the motherly energy is not necessarily just your mother. It's the energy of all of those traits I just explained. It's like where we come out of the physical womb and we're welcomed into the womb of the world, right? This nurturing bedrock and foundation of love and support and connection. I've noticed that there's two core wounds that come from the mother wound, and the first one is a child being met by caregivers who have a wounded inner child who are seeking to fulfill their wounded, unmet needs through the child. For example, if a caregiver has abandonment issues or deep anxiousness, they finally have this child, this love that will never leave them, and they become overly attached to it. And in doing so, this child doesn't have the space to develop and cultivate their own emotional connection to self. Or the other way, the other core wound is when there's an insufficient amount of love and the child becomes love deprived. And it's kind of like you're hungry and starving for oxygen. This is why men out there who constantly need a woman to feel good, that sense of feeling good is the nourishment to his nervous system that little boy needed from the motherly energy growing up. And the only way he knows how to get that is through a woman, or is through his unhealthy habits like smoking, vaping, sex, drug, the shadow feminine, right?
Sure.
That's how that plays out. The first wound, how that plays out when you don't have this space because it's like you're so consumed by this anxious love, this needy love, is that yet again, you don't have the space to cultivate a connection to yourself. And in doing so, what happens is a man never fully disconnects emotionally from the motherly energy. He doesn't have the space to create that separation. So he never actually becomes separate. He never actually learns how to breathe on his own. I like to explain it like the oxygen mask. When you have an oxygen mask on where you're just getting like pumped with oxygen, right? You have this mask that's connected to your face where you're being fed oxygen. You don't know how to breathe on your own because all you've ever known is this love. And there's so many men who are still so emotionally connected to their mother, right? But then mother's still feeding them this love, this oxygen, and he hasn't created that separation, and he hasn't created that space to really stand on his own 2 feet and breathe on his own.
Like an emotionally enmeshed relationship
Yes.
that's too overbearing, over demanding.
Yep.
And some might really almost succumb to that. And then some men as well become super avoidant of it, and then relationship doesn't feel safe. And that's usually
Overwhelming experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because it was.
Yep.
Because it was. And in that experience in the relationship to his mother, he actually couldn't individuate. He couldn't actually have a sense of self. He couldn't actually have wants, needs, because he needed to take care of his mother.
Yep. Yeah, there's so many different ways that it can happen and that it can show up. But for the most part, speaking into that, when there's still that emotional connection to the mother and there hasn't been that separation, and when a man gets into a relationship with a woman, she can unconsciously feel that there's another woman. He's energetically connected to this his mother.
Right.
And she can feel that. And for some reason, she just can't trust him, or she just isn't attracted to him sexually,
Right.
or she just feels like she's anxious or needy or jealous because she just feels that there's something else out there. Or there's the other side, which I explained before. It's like needing to fill that void of when a man's love deprived, right? He'll constantly need to fill that void with things to make him feel better, especially a relationship or his bad habits. And the worst one is when he then turns to work. He avoids relationships altogether. And I like to say, if a man's avoiding relationships, he's avoiding his potential. Because a relationship will reflect back to you everything. And you will have to, at some point, meet and face the depth of yourself when it comes to relationships. But the worst part is when he hides behind work and he does well in work and the success validates
So insidious.
him. Yeah. But then it's a matter of time before that perpetuates. So yeah, the mother wound, it's not necessarily the mother, it's the energetic connection to love.
Yeah, beautifully put. And what arises for me is, how does a man sever that relationship with his mother? And how does he individuate so he can then stand in his own 2 feet?
Yep. I like to ask men, what is it you feel you need to do to break up with your mom? What do you feel that needs to happen?
I like that.
Yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, I know what I need to do. Yep. I need to set boundaries. That's another thing in itself. Boundaries. When a man didn't have that space as a little boy to claim his anger. As a boy, we need to feel safe enough, or as a child, we need to feel safe enough that I can be angry at my caregivers and they won't pull love away from me. They won't shut me down for being angry. Because this is us resisting and creating that separation from dependency to independency. And when that doesn't happen, we don't develop this strength of being able to set boundaries. So there's a key aspect to that I take men through around, it's not only setting a boundary with your mum, it's reclaiming your fucking power of reconnecting to your anger and being able to actually set boundaries because you've reclaimed your anger, because our anger is our protector. That's a developmental strength that a man needs to reclaim at some point. So that's some of the ways that we start actually healing that mother wound of creating that separation and bringing it back to, for thousands of years, there's been the rite of passage from boy to man. And in that rite of passage, between ages 7 to 14, they strip the boy away from his mother. Why? Because they know this. Energetically, the cord needs to be severed between him and his mother so he can learn how to breathe on his own.
I love that. And I guess what I would as well want to add here is really cultivating the skills, cultivating the safety within oneself as well to stand on one's own feet. So really as well, reflecting on the fact, where am I still sourcing safety from my mother? Where am I still sourcing safety from both of my caregivers? I'm not trying to say this in a condescending way. Where am I still being a little boy going to his parents for safety? And it could show up in all these kinds of different ways, seeking for reassurance, or maybe even looking for money, or even communicating things that give us a sense of self-doubt. Not that those things are wrong, but it's more, where are these things coming from when one does it?
Or checking in with them to make a decision.
Yeah. There's so many things exactly of how that can show up. And I think as well, really separating ourselves from that and creating some distance around that is definitely as well an important avenue. And then as well, looking at how can I cultivate the skills that are really necessary for me to stand on my own two feet? Maybe working with a mentor or connecting with a man where you have a feeling, wow, like this guy really looks solid. Maybe I can learn from him. Maybe I'm curious and maybe I ask him some questions around, hey, what have you done in order to get to where you are? Just to have an understanding of some form of guidance, some form of way, just so you can actually go on the journey.
Yeah, what I hear in that is really, where are you still outsourcing your power to things outside of you?
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. So one of the things that I feel is big as a conversation is this idea of nourishment. And what is nourishment to you? And how can a man take responsibility for his own nourishment and not outsource it out to his partner or do it in rather unhealthy ways that are actually not very saturating in the process?
It's him cultivating a relationship with the feminine, his own inner feminine and the great divine feminine as well. That's not something outside of him, but him being connected to self and to source, to God, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. What that's looked like for me is, first of all, like I said, cultivating a relationship to the feminine, so my emotional body, and building a relationship with my felt sense and what I'm feeling in any moment. And by the way, if a man doesn't have his own nourishment or his own ways to nourish himself, he'll burn himself out, or he'll become extremely overwhelmed in business, or he'll become overwhelmed in relationship. It'll be too much for him. Or he'll seek to those things in order to receive his nourishment, and it'll never feel enough. So what it's looked like for me is cultivating a relationship with my breath. That's my nourishment.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, bro. Coming here to Bali, it's hectic. It's chaos. Like, it's a very chaotic energy. And when we got here, like, first thing I did was I went to a breathwork class. Went to 2 in the first week. I really committed to, like, throughout the day being more connected to my breath, because that's how I experience that sense of nourishment and connection to self. And the breath is our connection to self. Now, some practices of that is the breath, and then practices like having a bath, receiving the warmth of a bath, laying in the sun, receiving the warmth of the sun, receiving nourishing food in your body. It's the practice of gratitude. It's like the small, subtle little ways that you can experience nourishment, love, and joy in your own being, in your own nervous system. Then experiencing that nourishment in a greater form.
How can he nourish himself while he is in a relationship and not get too dependent on receiving the nourishment from her?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's receiving that nourishment from the breath, but then the nourishment from brothers.
Yeah, I was just going to say, man.
Yeah. the nourish, because it really is a nourishing thing. Like, bro, like connecting with you today, I feel this sense of nourishment.
Agreed.
Tomorrow, I'm going to go sit in circle with men. I feel a sense of nourishment from that. Brotherhood's such a pillar. It's not only challenge and support, but it's also that sense of connection and nourishment as well. So when a man doesn't have these pillars in his life of nourishment, for the most part, that connection to his own feminine, his own emotional experience, he's going to seek to things outside of him for that nourishment, because that trapped, stuck, stored energy has got to go somewhere. And through my nourishment is how I actually feel and process. Like when I got here to Bali, there was emotion that came up for me, and it was quite a traumatic experience last time I was here. And with that, I could, through my connection to the breath, it creates enough stillness and quietness for us to actually listen to the whispers of what our body's actually trying to speak to us. And now, if I didn't have that nourishing pillar and practice in my life, I wouldn't have been able to hear the whispers that my body was trying to speak to me, which was, there's emotion that's seeking to be felt. There's loneliness, there's sadness, there's grief here of a chapter of last time you were here and what happened. And with that, through the breath, through the nourishment of the feminine, of beautiful, nourishing feminine music, breathing into that, I just felt and cried and felt and breathed and felt and cried. After that, I felt my capacity was huge. So as a high performing man, it's not only important, it's a necessity that you have pillars in your life of developing and cultivating like devotional practices of nourishment. Yeah.
There's so much gold in what you said, and just want to give as well an example that of today, actually, for me, in the sense that before we met, I actually had a very demanding day, a lot of admin work, a lot of things for me to plan and structure due to a trip that I'm taking to the United States. So I noticed at around 4 p.m., even in preparation for a conversation, I was in a very cerebral space. I was actually not connected to my body. And I came to recognize, for me to show up in the way that I want to be here, for me to be in a connected place, I actually needed nourishment. I needed to provide myself nourishment. Well, how did I do that, right? I did take a longer shower, connect with water. I had a weighted blanket. It's a really cool tool that I'm actually really enjoying to use at the moment. I did some stretching and some breathing just to come into contact with myself in a gentler way. And with that, when we met at the cafe, I was in a very different place for us to come into contact. So I would also argue that nourishment is actually an avenue for us to deepen our emotional connections, to deepen our relational connections. And so it's not just about ensuring that, you know, we're in a good place with ourselves. That's definitely an avenue. As well, it's important for us if we want to be powerful leaders in whatever it is that we're doing. But it's also important for us if we want to have the deep relationships we desire, because we experience relationships through our bodies. And so this is really where I think men can understand the value of nourishment.
Yeah, I just want to reflect something back to you. When we pulled up this afternoon, you're also having tea. That's a nourishing practice as well. And that's been a nourishing practice for me too, is being present with the practice of tea. But for the most part, I just want to honor that, bro, I could feel that. As soon as I sat down, I was like, our nervous systems are always communicating to each other. When it comes to communication, words are only 7%. The rest is energy. And I could feel that you were connected to yourself. And because of that, you created the safety for me to also go, I just had a hectic ride, like dodged like 100 trucks, like
fucking Raya Canggu, eh?
Yeah, riding through the middle of Bali. And then come like rocking up, it like I could feel it was like it's like a grounded, present tree. And with that, I really want to recognize that, and for people to hear, like, have it reflected back what it feels like receiving that from someone who's receptive. Like I felt that, bro. I was like, yeah, this man, I feel safe with you already because you're safe in your own nervous system. Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, like one being safe in one's nervous system provides another person the experience of I can be safe in my own nervous system.
Co-regulation.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I'm all about. So, you know, you're speaking my language with that.
Yeah.
Dude, I feel like there's so much we could get into, but we're going to be wrapping up our conversation in the next 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
One thing I feel like I can't close our conversation without asking you is, and we won't have too much time to expand on it, but it's something that I'm really interested in, particularly as well for our men who might have challenging relationships with their fathers. From my understanding, you had a father that held you up to a very high standard. And that in some ways must have been challenging for you in certain moments. And the reason why, correct me if I'm wrong, but he held you up to a high standard because he wanted you to show up in the best way. So you actually have the life that he never had, right? And I actually listened to a conversation where you mentioned that you came to a point where you actually felt gratitude for his way of operating, for his way of being, and you even thanked him.
Yeah.
I would like our listeners to understand what had you done that allowed you to come to that transition, particularly after perhaps having the impact of a very overly demanding or even critical father.
I became aware of a core emotional wound of that I'm not good enough. The reason why I'm not taking action is because I don't feel like I'm good enough. The shame beneath that of the little boy who felt like there's just no matter who he was, no matter who he became, no matter what he did, he was just never good enough. So when I became clear of that, I was like, well, yeah, that came from dad, right? Because it was like, sometimes it was like living in the freaking army with him. Like all the time. I'm South African, so I was born in South Africa. I grew up born and raised by South African parents, and then a father who was in the army in South Africa. And based on his childhood, he's very just like he's set in his ways, and he's very strict, and he's very, this is the way it's got to be. Now, at first it was blame. It was like, yeah, well, because of dad. Yeah, well, because, yeah, look at the way I was brought up. Like, I never felt like I was good enough for him. Most people stop there. Yeah. Awareness alone is not enough. It took for me to start writing and getting clear on, and this is actually a practice that men can actually then go and do, is I wrote down, I purged the frustration, how angry I was at like the childhood that I didn't have because of the standards that he just constantly held us to. He held us to such a high standard that every time I raised the bar and met the standard, he raised the bar again. And I could never reach it. And I made that mean as a little boy that who I am is not good enough. I'll never be good enough. So why bother trying? So I would just give up very easily on things. Yeah. With that, also lacked the emotional capacity to deal with things as well, because I didn't have that represented to me. Now, it was for me to purge that first, the grief, the anger, the frustration of the childhood that I didn't have, the love and support that I didn't receive from him that I needed. Then I wrote, just pages after pages, who I've become because of those core wounds. The man I've become because of the father that I had. The things that I've achieved because of the core wound of not feeling good enough. And the strengths that I've gained because of that. And I was like, I got like 2 sentences in, and I was like, I'm done. I've got it. It's all good. Like, I'm sweet. I kept writing though. I knew there was more to be felt. As I kept writing, just a flood of tears, emotion, gratitude, love, all of it started coming through. What happened was, it's like we have these floating ideas in our subconscious of like, yeah, I'm grateful for dad. And yeah, I know he had a rough upbringing, but it was like they clicked. And it was this understanding of like full-bodied sense and feeling of love and gratitude and appreciation of he loved me so much that he held me to such a high standard, and I was the one who made it mean that who I am is not good enough. I made that meaning, not him. He'd never actually said that to me. He actually would tell me, I'm doing this for you, and I want you to have everything that I didn't have. Now, with that, I came to this realization of love, gratitude, appreciation of like, yeah, it was all from love. And me realizing like I'm proud of the man I am today and the man that I'm becoming. And it not only gave me an understanding of like, you know, the childhood that I had. What's also important, a very key point in this, is that we don't protect our parents. Yeah, because when we protect our parents of not actually honoring the experience you actually had in childhood, we're disregarding what that little boy experienced, and we're disregarding him even more and perpetuating it more.
Yeah.
So it was really embodying, accepting, loving all of that. And I went through that practice, and then I went and had coffee with him, and I shared it. I'm like, hey dad, I just want to let you know, I just want to share with you, like, I see it now. Like, you know, you were so hard on me, my brother, my sister, like, and you gave me everything. You worked so freaking hard. And I made it mean that I wasn't good enough because you held me to such a high standard. And I'm so grateful because the man I am today, I've become this man because I didn't feel like I was good enough. And I just want to say thank you. I'm grateful for you. Yeah. And he's just started crying, and he started realizing it was like the confirmation he didn't know that he needed, that he did a good job as a dad.
Man, I love this. This is awesome. And, you know, just hearing that as well gets me all psyched up, because I can very much relate to that as well in my own experience. The sense that my father as well grew up in Russia, and we actually, so I was born in Germany and grew up in an immigrant family, ultimately, in a blue collar family. And so with that, I very much learned from an early age quality skills such as persistence, dedication, commitment, striving for excellence, ambition. And it was really tough in many ways for me to be consistently held to such a high standard. but I recognize now in many ways how it's shaping me who I am today. It's supporting me in ways that I still have difficulty articulating, but I think this is an important one for men to hear, and just in terms of how that pain itself can still carry a blessing, and that is not to diminish as well the pain that comes with it, which is an important caveat that you mentioned. It is important for us to actually feel the unfelt, to acknowledge the ways that we might have been impacted, and the hurt that might have been present. Right. And to actually give ourselves the time and the space. There was a time where I didn't speak much with my parents because I actually had to allow myself the space to separate and actually feel what was there to be felt.
Yeah.
But it was only then, on the aftermath of actually giving myself the space and still tending to that part when I'm required to or when it's being asked to, that way I can show up with my parents, not needing them to parent me any longer.
Yeah.
And I can show up with a lot more gratitude today around who they are for me today, or the ways they have been for me.
Yeah. Yeah, brother. One thing that comes up, last thing, super quick, is that's the aspect of the golden shadow. And so many men think that this false self that's been built from this little boy who felt like he wasn't good enough, this false sense of self, it's like, oh, I'm going to lose my sense of drive and this power and this hunger that I have for success or creating impact or whatever if I heal the boy. And what's actually incredible is you get to receive what's called the golden shadow, which is all the incredible traits that you've developed along the way of becoming the man that you are today. But you get to also let go of all of the fears and the wounds of the little boy, and you get to integrate the dark shadow, but for the most part, really claim that golden shadow, and it gets to be both. Yeah.
Man, I love it. And I feel like I could talk with you for ages, Ryan. This was awesome. I wish we could have a little bit more time, but unfortunately our time is running up. So we're going to be closing out in a few moments. And before I ask you my final question, I would love for our listeners to know, where can they find you? And are there any offerings that you would like our listeners as well to know about?
Yeah, Instagram and Facebook, just at Ryan Moresby-White. Super simple. I post heaps of value. I've also got a free guide for men to be able to go through. It's just a journaling guide, 18 prompts for them to start becoming aware of some of these core wounds and what to actually do in the next steps for that journey. Yeah, apart from that, I've got things coming out here and there, and just keep an eye out. Yeah.
Nice, man. I'll make sure as well to put that in the show notes as always. Yeah. All right. Final question. It may be a minute or two. One of the things I recognize is a lot of men are guided to this type of work through pain. They need the relationship to fall apart. They need the business to blow up. They need to experience a pain that's so big enough that says, I can't go on any longer. And it's almost that which propels them towards actually doing this type of work. Now, while that might still be, unfortunately, the thing that's driving for so many of us in the collective, I would also argue there can be a context where we're guided by inspiration, right? And I want to hear from you, for our listeners, what do you believe is the value for any man who might be interested in this type of work? What might this type of work provide him if he's willing to lean in? If he's willing to look at the pain that might be unresolved, if he's willing to look at the parental relationships that he might not have really addressed, or the internalized sense of shame, what is there for him?
What's there for him first and foremost is the two main areas: is relationships and work, and his career and his mission. Is in relationship, he gets to be solid within himself. He gets to be the solid frame, this solid masculine pillar, this grounded presence who's deeply connected to himself, that naturally through his presence, for example, like when we caught up, I felt that sense of safety in your nervous system, which created safety in my nervous system. He gets to be that for a woman. Through him having a regulated and safe nervous system, he gets to naturally create that safety in the nervous system of a woman. Now, in doing so, it's like that creates the opportunity for him to truly lead his relationship. And that's where he's going to experience a very deep sense of meaning, fulfillment, joy, and happiness when he's got that strong connection to himself, and his happiness isn't sourced from the validation of a woman or a relationship. It's the way I like to explain it, the felt sense is that sense of feeling unstoppable or unshakable when you're being loved by the most incredible woman in the world. Imagine if you could feel that on your own and then be in relationship. That's what's possible through this work. Then in purpose and mission and work is waking up every single morning with actual excitement, right? With actual like fire in your belly for what it is that you get to do every single day. We're here in Bali, right? Being able to travel the world, like it's so incredible. I get to wake up every single day on mission, on purpose, helping men globally. It's this sense of fulfillment that's far greater than me. And for the most part, it's the man that he becomes along the path of him being on the path of his purpose and his mission is what's most important. And in that comes this deep level of fulfillment that you can't really explain until you've experienced it. But now that I have team and I have some of my closest brothers working with me in my company, in my mission that's far greater than me now, it provides this sense of fulfillment and fun and joy and passion. That's just like, it's unexplainable. You could probably hear it in my passion. And yeah, it's exciting and it's fun.
It's definitely heard in your words and in your voice. And I think that's a very compelling invitation for a lot of us, for a lot of guys listening in to step into. Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, man. You're an incredible man. And it's been an honor to connect with you over the last 2 hours. Yeah, I really want to acknowledge you, for all the ways that you show up, for all the wisdom that you've provided our audience here today, for all the work that you've as well done to really come to this point. So I just really want to thank you here before we close off.
Thank you, brother. Receive that.
Wonderful. All right. For our listeners, I hope you got a lot of value out of this conversation here with Ryan. As always, if this conversation resonated with you, and if you feel like there's another man that might receive value from this conversation, I invite you to pay it forward. And until next time, signing off. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.